For any of you who haven't worked with me before, or if you don't follow me on YouTube or any of my social media channels, I spend quite a great deal of time educating different communities around the areas of the law that I practice in. I definitely feel it's important to share the knowledge that I have. And I also really like to kind of break down the stereotypes of my profession, especially shedding light on different areas of estate planning that there are a lot of kind of mistakes and myths surrounding. The purpose of this webinar, though, is to provide some much needed information for business owners. I have unfortunately found that this information that I'm going to present is not being presented in other ways that it's going to reach business owners, including the business owners that it's going to actually impact. A little disclaimer, though, before we dig in, just to kind of cover myself. So the information that I'm going to present tonight is being provided just for informational purposes, and it shouldn't be construed as me offering legal advice or creating any type of attorney-client relationship. And you shouldn't act or refrain from acting on the basis of the information I present tonight without seeking appropriate legal advice from myself or another attorney. So now that we've got that out of the way, I also want to say, just feel free to ask questions in the chat during the presentation. A good friend of mine, Dan Malcolm from Sequent Planning, is here kind of moderating the chat tonight. And we'll take some questions kind of throughout. And if it seems relevant at the time, I'll have Dan read those questions out loud, and then we'll do some questions at the very end as well. Okay, let's hope the PowerPoint works. All right, so the Corporate Transparency Act was passed in 2021. And the main requirement of this new act is that businesses have to file a report. And this is a report at the federal level. The report is called a Beneficial Ownership Information Report. The acronym is BOIR. And generally, the purpose of this report is to create a central database at the federal level that's going to show all of the owners of every active and non-exempt business in the US. And the way that this has been presented is that this Corporate Transparency Act is trying to deter or eliminate different types of illegal activities. So this could be business owners trying to commit tax fraud. It could be money laundering from one business to another, could be terrorism. There are just a lot of things that they've put out there as reasons why they passed this act. While it was passed in 2021, it wasn't effective until January 1st of this year. And then what that means is that it is still going to apply to pre-existing businesses. The first step in determining whether or not this act is going to apply to your business is to determine if you're a reporting company. And the key with these two definitions on the screen is that you could be a domestic or foreign reporting company as long as you had to file something with your local government. And that something is filed to establish your business. We've got some examples here of what is a reporting company and what is not a reporting company. The most common reporting companies are going to be LLCs or partnerships. Those are going to be created at the state level, and it doesn't have to be Michigan. It could be any state in the US. And that's accomplished by filing articles of organization. And then on the corporation side of it, you've got articles of incorporation. Now, you could have an LLC that is taxed as a corporation. Either way, you're still covered. You're going to fall into one of those categories. But then there are also businesses that are not going to be covered by this act. So if you have a sole proprietorship, if you just do business under your own name and you haven't filed anything with the state, this isn't going to apply to you. There's also DBAs, so doing business as, and those are filed at the county level, that also is not going to apply to you because you don't have a state filing. Then we have a bunch of exempt companies. These are all going to be domestic or foreign reporting companies that will be exempt from filing this report. And as you read through these, there's some commonalities. Many of these businesses are already going to be regulated in some way, probably at the federal level. And so this type of reporting would be pretty redundant. I do want to touch on the one in red there, which is an inactive entity. And this could actually apply to quite a few businesses. The criteria for qualifying for the exemption as an inactive entity is going to require that you are both established prior to January 1st of 2020 and that you have essentially had no business dealings for the last 12 months. So you're not going to have owned any property, not had any accounts opened. You can't have received money or paid money. So essentially inactive. An example of this, and I see this quite often, would be you set up an LLC or a corporation. You maybe had intentions to do business or you did do business for a while, but then you just shut down. You've been inactive, but you didn't actually file a certificate of dissolution. And that's pretty common. So you may be deficient at the state level and that can be cured on its own. But if you have that type of an entity, you may still qualify as inactive. Before we move on to what needs to be reported, Dan, do we have any questions?
Not yet.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's talk a little bit about what we have to report for this filing. You are going to need to report the name, address, date of birth, and driver's license number with picture for the beneficial owner and the company applicant. They are offering an option, and I've got the link there on the screen. If you're not comfortable providing your date of birth or driver's license number, you can get what's called a FinCen identifier. And I would recommend, if you're going to go that option, go to the link, get the number before you go into file, so that way you already have the number available. And then the other important thing is that the beneficial owners that we're talking about here, they have to report on themselves. So if you're in a partnership, maybe even a managing partner, or if you're the majority owner in a corporation, you're only responsible to report for yourself. As far as beneficial owners go, this could be you as an individual. It could be you and a spouse. If you have a trust and the trust owns the business interest, it's going to be whoever the trustees or the grantors are. And so for a married couple, if you have a trust, you may have to report on multiple beneficial owners. But if Dan and I are in business together and, it's a 50-50 partnership, I'm only responsible for reporting on myself, and Dan has to report on himself. Then for the company applicant, this is where it gets a little tricky. This is going to be the individual who actually filed at the state level when the business was set up. So now we're back to filing the articles, either of organization or incorporation. And that company applicant is the person who signs on the bottom. This is often somebody like myself, or maybe a tax professional, maybe another financial professional. And a lot of these individuals are now kind of tweaking the services that they offer because they are essentially forever tied to the businesses that they set up if they serve as that company applicant. One of the little nuances, though, with the company applicant is you're only required to report on the company applicants for businesses that were established after January 1st of this year. The reason being, if we went back to every business that had ever been established and that didn't qualify as inactive or exempt, many of those company applicants could be in different different businesses, different fields. They could have passed away. It's going to be really difficult to get that information. It's also important to just remember that name, address, date of birth, driver's license number, and picture. We need that for beneficial owners and the company applicant. Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about when the report needs to be filed. If your business was formed before January 1st of this year, and again, you're not inactive, you are required to file, you have until January 1st of next year. So you've essentially got the next 5 months to file. If you start your business this year, so after January 1st of 2024, you only have 30 days to file that report. And that is catching up to a lot of people, because if you don't know about it and you file your business, you kind of run out of time pretty quickly to get that filed. Then it's also important to know that you have to file updates. So whether you start the business before January 1st of this year or anytime this year and into the future, if you have an update that needs to be filed, you have to do that within 30 days as well. So let's talk about some reasons why we might need to update. I've got quite a list there. This is everything that I've been able to come up with that would be tied to the information that you have to report on. So obviously, if you have to report on your address and your address changes, you're going to have to file an update. There's a couple of scenarios there where maybe your driver's license could change. If you move out of state and you now have a driver's license issued by another state, or marriage or divorce can sometimes change your driver's license number with the letter at the beginning. And then you could have a name change, or if you did estate planning and now that ownership is part of your trust, the owner has changed. So kind of keep an eye out for reasons why you might have to file an updated report. And then as far as how the report is filed, there are two options. You can obviously go through the system online, and we're actually going to walk through some screenshots of that here in a minute. You can do it online, and then you're able to download a transcript at the end, and you can obviously do updated reports, corrected reports. All of those can also be done online. And then you can also download the report, fill it out, and send it in. Okay, before we start walking through the screenshots, Dan, do we have any other questions right now?
We do. We have one question, and that is, do all LLCs have to file?
So that is going to depend on the other criteria. Who'd that question come from, Dan?
Tina.
Tina, okay. So an LLC would need to file if it is active. So if it doesn't qualify as an inactive entity, it's going to have to file. And that's going to be the biggest key there, is whether or not it's been active. And determining whether or not it's active, you can kind of walk through that list of information on the previous slide. Tina, you'll be able to go back through and watch this later as well, because I'm recording. And if you check off any of those boxes, as far as whether you've taken money in or you've sent money out, changed ownership, those types of things, then even simple LLCs are going to be required. And I think that's one of the commonalities that I'm seeing when people are talking about this, is that there's a lot of little mom and pop businesses. There are people who run Etsy shops and little hometown stores that are just these small businesses, and many of them don't think that this applies to them, and it very likely does. So, great question, Tina. Dan, any other questions before we move on?
No.
Okay, thanks. All right, so when I went through and did my report back in January, I decided to take some screenshots. I feel like this type of being put into a situation like this can be really overwhelming for people. And if you don't know about this filing and all of a sudden it's getting dropped on you, it can you can feel a little anxious about, what is it going to look like? And how long is it going to take me to do this? And how do I input the information? So I decided to take some screenshots here, and we're just going to kind of walk through these. They might generate some other questions, and then we'll do some questions at the end as well. The link that I provided in the slides will take you to this main page. And obviously there's the button at the top there about getting started for that BOIR. So we would click on that button first. And then this is where you would actually be able to download the PDF version. And then once it's completed, this is also where you would upload it. But if you're going to just fill this report out online, I circled in red there, that's the button that you would click. And then of course, they're going to give you a warning. And luckily it's pretty short and you should be able to read through it before you agree. But essentially they just want you to understand what you're agreeing to and how the information is going to be used. So there's really 4 options. And I talked a little bit about this in the slide about doing updates. So if you did file a report and then you needed to either correct it or update it, you're going to go through this same process. Once you have clicked the appropriate button here, then you're just going to navigate through to what you need to change or update. For purposes of this, though, we're just going to treat it like an initial report. And you'll see at the bottom there, it does pre-fill in the date. So this again is when I filed back in January. And then I also mentioned earlier, if you are going to go the route of getting that FinCen identifier, I think it's going to be a lot easier if you request it and receive it before going in to start this report. Otherwise, you're going to start getting that number by clicking number 3, and then it's going to take some time to go through that process. Number 5 down there wants you to include the company legal name, and it's going to be important to look at your articles so that you know exactly how that company is listed. And then as far as the taxpayer identification type goes, this is where you're going to need to pull out some paperwork, and you're going to need to find that tax ID or EIN that you have for your business. You're going to use that here. If you don't have a tax ID number, it's going to be important to get one so that you're not having to use your social security number. And then you'll see that it's grayed out, but obviously if you were going to be reporting as a foreign reporting company, you would need to toggle that button at the bottom for a different country. And then we're still reporting information about the company. So now we need to let them know what state was it formed in. And for most people that I'm reaching tonight, it's probably going to be Michigan, but Delaware is a big state that has some special rules about corporations and trusts and LLCs. So it's not uncommon that you might have been formed in another state. And then the same that I said about the name of the company, when it comes to the address, you're going to want to be looking at your articles to figure out what is the official address for your company. Then we're going to get to the point where if you start your business this year, so after January 1st, 2024, you're going to need to add information about your company applicant. For someone who maybe set up their own LLC and they're the only owner, you're probably going to be both company applicant and the beneficial owner. But if the business already existed, you're going to click on that number 16 button, and then you don't actually have to report on your company applicant. I did kind of go through the slides here as if we did need to report on the company applicant, and these fields are going to look very similar, if not identical, to what you have to report on the beneficial owner. If there is a FinCen ID, it would be entered here. And then you'll see it's going to ask for the full legal name as well as the date of birth. And then the nice thing about the fields for the company applicant is that you're not forced to use your residential address. You can use a business address. And I think that's going to be really helpful for people who offer the service of setting up businesses, but don't want to put all their personal information out there. Then we're going to have to include information here about the identifying document, in this case, your driver's license. And then that number gets entered in, and then it will also populate a link there where you can upload a picture. So it would be a good idea to make sure that you have a nice clean picture of your driver's license before you start this process. And then we're going to jump over to the screens for the beneficial owner. You'll see at the top there, there's a blue box that says add beneficial owner. If you are in that situation where maybe it's a husband and wife and you're both trustees of your trust and you're going to file the report, you know, maybe one of you is going to do it for both of the trustees, you're going to have to scroll back up to this little blue button after you get done with the first owner, and that's going to give you the option to add another one. And then you're really going to go through and add the same information. So if you have a FinCen ID, you're going to put that in. And then you've got your name, date of birth. You're going to go through and add your address. And then if you haven't done the FinCen ID, then you're going to put in your driver's license, your number, and you're going to upload your picture. So it's, like I said, it's going to be the same information as your company applicant, with the exception of you're probably not going to have a business address for the owners, and you're going to be using home addresses. And then after everything is entered, you're going to get to the end of the system. It's going to ask you to verify that all of the information is accurate. You'll have to enter your information in here as far as a confirmation email and your name. And then they want you to check the box and agree that you understand you have the obligation to file. And if you don't file an updated or corrected report within that 30-day time frame, they do have civil and criminal penalties. The last time I looked, it was $500 a day up to $10,000 fines for every day that you don't file past when you're supposed to file. And then there was also some jail time. So it's definitely important to take this seriously, determine whether or not you need to file. And then it's really not, it's not difficult to go through and do this. It just takes some planning, and then it's going to take some time to go through and make sure your information is accurate. Once you finalize the report, you do have the option to download a transcript. I would highly recommend that if you go through, and then you'll know that you're all set. And those are all the slides I have for the screenshots. We're doing good on time. So Dan, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have one that just came in from Tina. Have they sent out information to all businesses? Just wondering how many small businesses have not heard about this and what their penalty will be.
Yeah, so the only thing that I'm aware of that is being done to notify businesses is if you file with Laura, so that's the department with the state of Michigan that you're going to file your articles with. If you file with Laura online, once you get the filing endorsement, I have noticed that there's a little kind of asterisk at the bottom that says that there's this new filing requirement and you should get legal advice to determine if it's required for your business. Beyond that, from what I have found, the information is coming from people like me, or maybe your tax professional will know about it. Other people, other professionals in your life may know about it, but I've found that the burden of getting the word out and making sure that even small businesses know that this might apply to them is falling on us. I'm not aware of state or federal departments who are notifying people, and I personally haven't received anything as a business owner beyond learning about it myself through continuing ed. Good question, Tina.
I had I guess I had not put two and two together before that trusts were involved. So So my clients who have revocable or irrevocable trusts need to go through this process.
Well, not the trust themselves. So
Okay.
if you have a client who owns a business, and if that business is connected to their trust, then that business, or I'm sorry, then the clients as trustees of their trust are also the business owners, and they would need to report that ownership interest. But if there's not a business involved, then the trust itself doesn't have any reporting that's required.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Brian sent in another question. Are accountants doing this for businesses?
That I don't know. I I know that there are some professionals who are offering to file the reports. I'm doing that for my clients as well. But because there is this obligation to file updates, that can create some potential liability that business owners may not want to take on. I have heard that there are some professional liability companies, especially for attorneys for malpractice insurance, who are now asking whether or not that service is being offered. And I'm assuming it's because they may up our rates because we're taking on quite a bit of liability and filing the reports. But I do think that there are other professionals who are at least notifying clients that they may have to do this filing.
Katrina, I got a question for you. So
Sure.
back in 2012, an accountant told my husband it'd be a good idea to create an LLC. He's a 1099 insurance agent. And at the time, I wasn't, but we are co-owners. He owns 90% of the LLC. I own 10%. He works for one agency in town, and I recently, obviously, I'm a 1099 insurance agent as well, but I work at a different insurance agency than my husband. We both, the accountant, when we set that up, said, for tax purposes, it's more beneficial to, instead of being a sole prop, to create the LLC because you're gonna not have to pay as much in taxes, and so that's how we've run it. So basically, the agency my husband works for pays our LLC, and the agency I work for pays our LLC, and then we pull the funds from that. So in that case, since we're both insurance agents, but we have an LLC to funnel those funds through, do we still need to file, or I'm a little confused?
I do think that you would need to file. We'd have to dig in a little bit more to those exempt entities. I think from my understanding with some of those regulated industries like banks and insurance companies, I think what they're talking about is auto owners doesn't have to report everybody who owns stock in auto owners because that is regulated in another way. But I would expect that if you own an LLC and you are an independent licensed agent, you still are the owner of your business. I don't own stock in Serena's insurance company. It's just you. So I think that's where there's this gray area, and we'd have to dig into the insurance section of the exemption.
Okay.
But my gut tells me that you probably have to file.
Okay. So so then assuming that we have to file, then I'm a little confused too on this company applicants. Now, we had an attorney that our accountant suggested. We had an attorney back in 2012 be the one that actually helped us create the LLC and everything, and he's the registered agent and whatnot.
Yep.
So then I have to have him complete this company applicant part?
No, the company applicant only has to be reported for businesses that were started January 1st of this year and going forward. The reason being that exact scenario, because what if that attorney has passed away and you shouldn't have to report on somebody who has passed on. So they're saying new business. So Serena, if you start a new LLC this month and you had me set it up and I'm your company applicant, we would file and I would be required to file as company applicant. But anything prior to this year, you only have to report the beneficial owner.
Okay, so if it's just me and my husband that are the owners of the LLC, if
Yep.
we had to file, it would just be the two of us that have to.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Katrina, Tina has a question. Big agencies, no, but small agencies, yes.
I don't
And
think I don't think it's that clean. I think that it boils down to whether or not they're regulated in some other way. And I can certainly look into that a little bit further, but if we're talking about like something that's publicly traded, so I'm just guessing the auto owners is publicly traded, but if it's something like that, you don't have to worry about that. But if you have you could still have a big business and be required to file if there's not some type of regulation in another way. I don't know, Tina, if you have an example, but I wouldn't say that it's a clean line between big and small business.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because I know a lot of people like myself, and Serena, they'll start an LLC just to have an agency. And then maybe they might hire an agent underneath them. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's still just them, and all of their insurance money is funneled through the LLC.
Right.
But I mean, State Farm, auto owners, all of them, they're corporations. So I would assume that, I don't know, because they're also insurance. It's all insurance.
Right.
So that's what I was just thinking. Because
Yep,
we are regulated.
it's definitely something that people in those industries are going to have to dig into further, and get advice on whether or not they fit into that exemption or not. Do we have any other questions, Dan?
not at the moment.
Okay. Well, like I said earlier, I've been recording this, so this will go up on my YouTube channel. You can always feel free to go back and watch it again. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to send me an email. And if you've got any friends or family members who are business owners who also have questions, I do offer free 15-minute consults. So I'd be happy to do a Zoom or an email phone type of a consult and help them determine whether or not they need to file. And then I am also offering the service of filing the report. So if nobody else has any other questions, I'll sign off for now. Thanks everybody for joining. Have a good night.